Right, the crowd are on their feet now. This has to be one of the best performances we've seen of the year. Only in the dying minutes will we ever see anything as great as this ever again. Oh, and it's a goal!
All right, we're here with Giles Goford, the author of Heading for the Floodlights. Thank you so much for being with us today, Giles. If you like, just give us some background and your first football memories.
Yeah, of course. Hi, Nick. Really great to be with you. So I got into football very, very heavily in about the spring of 1980. I remember watching the West Ham Arsenal FA Cup final on TV, although I didn't really know what was going on. It was one of those things that was kind of in the background. But it must have made a real impact on me, because as soon as I saw that game, I was just like, oh, I want to see much more of this. Of course, that was the end of the season, so I probably had to wait until the sort of start of the next season to really get into it. But by that time, I was a big Ipswich Town fan, as you could probably tell. I didn't live anywhere near Ipswich, and we didn't have any family connections to Ipswich, but it was that team under Bobby Robson, which I'm sure we'll talk about, just grabbed my attention. So I fell very hard for Ipswich, and was lucky enough to go and see them for the first time in December 1980 at Highbury, just after Christmas for a 1-1 draw. And then after that, I was completely smitten with the club.
Oh, cool. And I was going to ask you actually whether you had always been an Ipswich Town supporter. Did you actually end up? Did you first start off with another team, or was it just Ipswich straight away?
Again, I think I had leanings to Arsenal, and I can only explain that because they were the first team alphabetically in the Panini sticker book. I can't think of any other reason why. I mean, we lived just outside London, but there was no connection. My dad wasn't into football at all, so we happened to go to Arsenal that first match in 1980. But I've got a feeling it was because they were playing Ipswich that we went. So I did actually have an Arsenal replica kit in those days. It was a real classic. I wish I still had it. Real classic, scratchy, long sleeve Arsenal kit. But the ironic thing is, I asked my mum to sew on an Ipswich badge to go alongside the Arsenal badge, which is a terrible thing to admit. Obviously, fans must be going, "Oh my goodness, why did he do that?" So I think it was to sort of, I couldn't get an Ipswich kit for some reason at that time, so that was the next best thing, was to put my Ipswich badge on the Arsenal kit.
Wow. And I guess a lot of things haven't changed a lot, because you can always get the Man City and Arsenal kits at any corner of the globe. But if you try and be a bit more adventurous and go for Bournemouth and Ipswich, it gets a lot harder, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And ironically, I think there was something on. I saw an archive clip the other day on Facebook, and it was about replica kits, and it was probably filmed in about 1979. And the presenter, right behind the presenter, was a replica Ipswich kit. So they obviously clearly were available at that time. And they were about, £2.50 or something in those days. Yeah, incredible. Wow. It was a really good clip, actually, because so I didn't have an Ipswich kit until a couple of years later.
I do know one place in London that used to have every single kit, and it was called Lillywhites in Piccadilly Circus. Now I know they still exist and they're still there, but now they just go into them basically, whatever's fashionable. But back in the day, and I remember the early 80s, you could walk in there and pretty much take anything that was considered rare and unusual, as long as they were in the top flight or even in the second division.
I did go to Lillywhites, but ironically, that wasn't for football reasons. It was tennis. Mid-80s, I really liked my tennis, and in those days the players had sort of bespoke shirts, and I really liked Stefan Edberg's shirt. It was just probably about 87, 88, and it kind of had his initials woven into the red and the yellow and the green. It was a lovely kit almost, bespoke for Stefan Edberg, and I got that in Lillywhites because that was
Swedish. Was he? He was Swedish, wasn't he?
Yeah. But London, I think London based. He was my favourite player at that time, and they all had their own. Like Lendl had his own, Becker had his own, you know,
Oh,
a bit like obviously the branded stars of today, but they were doing it sort of much earlier. And yeah, I love that Stefan Edberg shirt. That was cool. Again, wish I still had it, and I don't.
I think for me, you say it was 1980 when your first football memories. For me, it was 1981, the FA Cup final between Manchester City and Tottenham Hotspur, and also 1981 was my first memory of Wimbledon, because we're on the subject of tennis. I think it was Bjorn Borg versus John McEnroe, so from 1981. I do remember that FA Cup final. A Manchester City player scored an own goal, and I was asking my dad questions. But why is it a goal? You know, I just couldn't understand why. You know, if the other person scored in his own goal, how could that be allowed? You know,
and he was probably wishing it hadn't. Tommy Hutchinson, yeah, I remember watching that cup final very, very well, and much more than the previous year, where I just like glimpsed it on TV and really wanted Man City to win for some reason, even though they'd beaten Ipswich in the semi-final. And then I remember when it was a draw and it went to the replay on the Thursday night, I was so excited because it meant an extra match to watch. You know, like I was desperate for a draw in the first match so I could watch another game. And that's how starved of football we were in those days, I guess, because it was a real experience to watch a live match on TV. So exciting.
Yeah, it's not on tap like it is these days, is it? So, yeah. UEFA Cup 1981, the final, Bobby Robson. Were you there? Did you watch some of the European games?
No, I'd have loved to have been there. So we did go to, you know, the Arsenal game that season. So as Ipswich went on in that 80-81 season, and it's the sort of, you know, it's the classic season for Ipswich fans of a certain age, where we were so close to winning an amazing treble of silverware. So the UEFA Cup run, it was, I remember listening to it on the radio, and I remember being aware of amazing quarterfinal win over Saint Etienne with Michel Platini, and then a really hard fought semi-final victory over Cologne, who were obviously very, very good, the West German side. So they get to the final against AZ Alkmaar of the Netherlands, and obviously being 8 years old, I'd never heard of this team, and you think, well, this is going to be easy, isn't it? You know, it's not Real Madrid, but they were a really, really good side. You know, a lot of Dutch international players, of course. Johnny Method, who went on to sort of Forest, obviously, played in that game, and Ipswich won the first leg 3-0 at home, which is a really comfortable margin of victory. But it didn't go their own way in the second leg, and even though they went 4-0 up on aggregate with an early goal from Franz Tyson, they suffered a sort of onslaught in the second half, and they lost 4-2 on the night to win 5-4 in aggregate. So I wouldn't say they scraped home, but an amazing final really to go to that 9-goal final over 2 legs and winning the trophy, which for Ipswich, and I wish I'd been in the town itself at that time. That would have been absolutely the scenes of the celebrations and the players lifting the trophy in the town hall of the balcony it still looks incredible to this day.
So you say you listened to that on the radio. I guess those kind of matches, we only had BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV, I think, back in those days. So the chances of that being televised were a bit touch and go, I suppose.
I don't think it was live, and if it was, I didn't watch it live. I can't remember why I didn't watch it live on TV, but maybe it wasn't. Of course, in those days, this was the UEFA Cup, and we of course had the European Cup, which English clubs were very successful as well. I know they weren't the finals weren't played on the same night, obviously, but I definitely have memories of listening to it on the radio, and for some bizarrely, the one thing I remember about that night wasn't necessarily the commentary of the goals; it was the commentary of the players, Mick Mills lifting the cup, that I remember. It was almost like, you could hear the crowd go wild when Mick Mills lifts the trophy over there. So, that's what I remember about that night.
He was the captain, was he? Was he the captain? Because I remember Tony Butcher, Mick Mills, Paul Mariner. They're the three, and maybe because they were England internationals, that's probably why they stuck in my mind more. But
I mean, for me, players... well, for me, you asked me about my all-time Ipswich 11, and I probably have to be quite straightforward and predictable by saying my all-time Ipswich 11 is that 11 who played in the UEFA Cup final, and and I would say that that's a little bit skewed because George Burley, who's such an amazing player for Ipswich, and then obviously went on to manage the club.
Is that the team mascot barking in the background?
That is. There's somebody at the door. So
yeah, all time to its 11, probably that 1981 thing.
I'm sorry that beg your pardon.
Well, good. These are the things
the beauty of home deliveries. I think the dog will stop barking in a minute. So we were saying about George Burley, who was such an integral part of Bobby Robson's side for so many years, unfortunately got injured halfway through the 80-81 season in a cup tie at Shrewsbury. So he wasn't able to play in the UEFA Cup sort of finale, as it were. So that he was replaced by Steve McCall, who was just a brilliant player in many positions, and they reshuffled the defence. So Mick Mills went to right back, Steve McCall played at left back essentially. But apart from that, the iconic Ipswich 11 of that era is Cooper in goal, Burley at right back, Mills at left back, Osman and Butcher at the defence, central defence, Walk, Murin and Tyson in midfield, all with their own amazingly different skills that really combine beautifully. Mariner up top with Gates and Brazil, on the channel. So that is the iconic Ipswich 11, in my opinion.
That's Alan. Is that Alan Brazil?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, who I later went on to work with at TalkSport Radio for several years. Awesome. Which was a really interesting experience again to hear some of the the stories from that era and talking him talking about how Bobby Robson nurtured the players, father-like figure, tough on them when he needed to be, but gave them freedom as well to be human beings and enjoy themselves as young men, but with the understanding that you're representing Ipswich Town, you want to win things, you've got to look after yourself and do the job on the pitch, but enjoy yourself as well, enjoy your life. And I think I think the players really respected that. All the ones I've talked to from that team just love Bobby Robson so much.
He definitely was a father-like figure, and it's probably in stark contrast, or maybe in some contrast to some of the comments I heard on TalkSport Radio about Brian Clough and Stuart Pearce and a few others, telling the stories of how he signed players and buying flowers for players' wives and things. I mean, you won't get another that type of manager come along anytime soon.
No, they were doing five different jobs at once. They would be obviously doing the scouting and driving the country and seeing reserve matches to scout players and things that obviously other people would do now in the football club. And I think I was lucky. I think I was lucky growing up in that era where the managers like Robson and Clough and all Graham Taylor, I'll put in that bracket as well. I think were just so ingrained in football. They loved it to the end of the earth, didn't they? And they would do anything for their club. And I like the fact that managers stayed at clubs for a long time and really, made that legacy. And I think, fans of those kind of clubs, Aston Villa or Forest or whoever were successful at that time, they look back now and think, wow, what an era, So I had to watch it a little bit from afar, and I was quite young. And by the time I was sort of being able to go to Ipswich a bit more regularly, we'd fallen away a little bit, but it was still going to Ipswich. It was still exciting. It doesn't really matter to me where we were in it would have been nice to pushing for the title a bit more, but I loved going to see them in the second division when they got relegated in the mid 80s. It was still a special experience for me to go there.
Right. Talking about relegation and unwanted records, Ipswich and Bournemouth share a unique Premier League record, don't we? Do you want to say it, or shall I say?
No, you tell me. Yeah, you tell me. Yeah, we've got a few.
9-0.
Oh, yeah, of course. The 9-0.
Yours was against. Yeah, tell me how did you find out, or whether you're at the game or
it was Manchester United away. I think it was in the March of '95. I hope I'm right. It was certainly the season we got relegated. And I remember it well because, again, I was listening on the radio 2, I guess it would have been then. And I think it was the commentary game. I was driving. Funny enough, we were driving to a dry ski slope. I was at Loughborough University at the time, and I was driving some friends. We were going to a dry ski slope, and I remember getting on the motorway, and we were like 2-0 down or something. And then within like half an hour of coming off the motorway, we were 8-0 down, and everyone in the back was just lobbing, abuse of me being the Ipswich fan. It was embarrassing. I think one of those goals was offside, so we can claim an 8-0 loss, but it was it's a bit embarrassing, isn't it?
It is.
And we weren't a great side then. We did go down from the Premier League, but then that led to a few interesting years in the sort of Championship, where we were sort of pushing back for a promotion. So it's only one result, isn't it? It's only 3 points.
I know. That's it. You don't get any extra. Yeah, you just get the goal difference. Well, hammered a little bit, but yeah, I was at that Liverpool-Bournemouth game that was the end of August 2022. My last game with Bournemouth before I came back to Australia, and by 8-0, I had enough. I thought, well, I've got 10 minutes. I might just go down to the local chip shop and get myself some chips, good old northern chips, before heading back down in a very quiet coach back to Bournemouth. So I couldn't believe it.
It's about how you bounce back from that, isn't it? And I think, if I'm right in saying, Bournemouth bounced back pretty well after.
Oh, the manager certainly bounced back. He got sacked the following day. So I think that was the start of Gary O'Neill's time at Bournemouth.
Yes.
And against everyone's prediction, managed to stay up with 4 games remaining. So, but yeah, I guess that had to happen for that to happen, I guess. All right, so I'm going to actually, before we go into the book, did you ever used to collect football stickers? I mean, that's a silly question, really, because every football fan collects football stickers. I understand you've got a football 80 album there. Do you want to show?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, Ben Dan. To say it was an obsession of mine was an understatement. It really meant the world to me. And I remember getting this. This is a really battered football 80.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah. So I mean, it's so bad. It's so battered. But I love it, and because it's a piece of history. And so half the Arsenal page is missing. So and half the Aston Villa page is missing. But so I love this page, but it's so iconic that I remember looking at that front page so many times. Hold it up properly. And I mean, it really is falling to pieces. So we have, Peter Reid there at Bolton Wanderers, obviously, before he went on to Everton and Brighton.
Yes, so they were in the top flight, weren't they?
They were in the top flight. Ironically, I took this down. I did an interview with the band The Levellers down in Brighton about 20 years ago, and I thought, what shall I take them down as a little sort of something to talk about? So I took them this book, actually. And so there I was interviewing the Levellers and going, oh look, here's a Billy battered Panini sticker book. They loved it. It was quite fun, and they were poring over it. I think Mark Lawrenson in there.
Oh yeah. Mark
Lawrenson there. Yeah. And so and I think even Bristol City are in. This was.
They were 79. They were in the first division, so they probably. I'm not sure how many years they stayed up.
Yeah.
Again, now, being a Rovers fan myself, I tend to skip that page pretty quickly.
Yeah, but even then, I knew that it was unusual for a club like Bristol City to sort of be in the top flight. And Joe Royle there was playing at the time.
Joe Royle, yes.
So every club, of course, had their star players and iconic players, and so I think
we're connected together. We're connected on LinkedIn, I think, Joe Royle and I.
And I won't go through every page, but I'll point out Gary Thompson there of Coventry City. Oh, yes. Gary kindly contributed to the book that I wrote, and it was really nice to talk to him. He was just full of great stories, so friendly, and I managed to talk to about 70 different players for the book, which was a real treat to sort of talk to people who hadn't talked to before, to hear their stories of playing in football, obviously in the 80s. Oh, there it is. Yeah.
There it is, the book. So, well, now that we're onto here, I'll put this banner back on and off every now and then. This is where you can
Brilliant.
get
Yeah.
the
Thank
book.
you.
It is. I've gone through it, and it's like this treasure trove. You discover something every time you go back to another page. For example, Chesterfield, and then I saw that little picture of the twisted spire. I'm thinking, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Just these little things, and you go back to the page, and you go, there's just so many amazing stories. But whose idea was it to write well, the book would come later, I suppose, but to actually go through these to go to all these different grounds, was it your idea, or you and your dad's idea, or?
Yeah, it was a joint idea. We couldn't have done it without the other, in the sense that I was the football kid, obsessed, and lived in the southeast, had been to, by this stage, so we're talking about 1988 here when the book or the trip started. So I'd been to football, and I'd been to grounds, Watford and Luton and Arsenal, and mainly in the south and southeast. But I really wanted to go and explore the country and have something that's tangible to me, which was football. So, I'd not been to Newcastle or Middlesbrough or really even Manchester at that time of my life. And my dad, say, wasn't into football, but he was a traveller. He really enjoyed adventure, and he enjoyed exploring new things. So it was a kind of between us. We thought, well, that would be a really fun thing to do. And it wasn't like we were desperate to get into every ground. We didn't have to meet players or managers. It wasn't necessarily what people might think of it as today, when you want to get that full immersive experience. Obviously, that was lovely when we did, but it was more a case of just being there and seeing what the towns and cities were like. And of course, the football grounds, which I was so sort of obsessed with and had seen on Match of the Day and the big match for so many years. And I want to stand outside Anfield and Old Trafford, but I also want to go and see Bury and Rochdale and Exeter, because they were just as important to me in the whole football pyramid, So that was really, and if you do something like that, you've got to do them all. There was no holding back with just doing the first division clubs. No way. It's got to be like everyone. Awesome. So that was.
You say it was 88 was the first trip. So how old you would have been? Like a teenager?
Just coming up 15.
15.
Yeah, so Easter 88 that we started at the beautiful Brunton Park in Carlisle was the first ground, which obviously they still play at. Still standing strong, and because that was the sort of furthest away from where we live. So
I was going to say I was going to say your strategy was go to the furthest one first and then work backwards. Was that right?
That's right. Yeah. And this was over Easter, so we knew we wouldn't be able to do all 92 in 3 days. I mean, that was impossible.
Yeah.
So we knew we'd have to do this over several different trips. It was 3 in the end. But let's just go. Yeah, let's head north, head for the floodlights, as it were, in Carlisle. And then wend our way down. And on that first trip, because it was during the season, we also wanted to take in some matches. And so we were lucky enough that we did see matches at Crewe and Manchester United and Ipswich on that trip. So it was also about where can we fit in as many grounds as we could, but with also a bit of time to go and see some matches in the afternoon or the evening. So it was really fun. Yeah.
I bet it was. So did you actually write down the list of all the 92, or you did it in terms of okay, this trip we're going to try and cover these lot? Or?
Yeah, I don't think we had the itinerary vaguely. I got a big cork board and put a map of the UK on it, as it were, and I pinned in the clubs, so we kind of had a rough idea of where we were heading, because obviously no sat nav back in those days. We had our atlas, but it was a case of, now we're up in Carlisle, obviously we've got to do as many of the northwest clubs that we can on that trip before wending our way down to see the match at Crewe on the Friday night. We went to Old Trafford on the Saturday, where they beat Derby 4-1 with Brian McClare scoring a hat-trick. And then the Sunday we did like 19 clubs. It was just a chance to really tick off loads of clubs, from starting at Bradford and then going all through Yorkshire, over to Grimsby, Scunthorpe, Doncaster, and then we ended up in the Midlands. Yeah, so the end of that third day was sort of Derby, Forest, Leicester, so it was a long day.
I guess in that area of England, it's just littered with the clubs. So when you say 19 at first, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like 19 clubs. But then you say that the kind of area, I was thinking it was going to be Lancashire area, like you got all your Burnleys and Blackburns and stuff. But if it was Cornwall, for example, you Exeter, and that was it.
That's right. You'd spend 2 hours getting to Exeter from the previous ground, and then you spend another 2 hours going to another one. So obviously,
Right.
Exeter, Plymouth, Torquay. Torquay was still in the league then, so
That's
you're
right.
doing some pretty long distances. I think we did something like 3,700 miles over the whole trip.
The whole thing. Wow.
Yeah.
I was going to say, your when you did the very first ground, was it Brunton Park, Carlisle? What did you feel anything different, or did you feel? I mean, would have been your first ground. Was it like finally, or what did you feel for that? What for Brunton Park?
Yeah, I do remember that really well. It was a sort of greyish day, more early start. We'd stayed in a hotel just outside Carlisle. I was really excited. I'd not been to Carlisle before, and obviously the slight disappointment at ground number one was that it was shut because it was Good Friday. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. They weren't at home either that day or the day after. So there's no one there. There's no shiny club reception as you'd have now with someone welcoming you. Yeah, of course, come in or whatever. So it was literally just, but that didn't take away the excitement at the time because we were there. We were there in Carlisle. We were starting the trip. It was like, don't think about all the ones to come. Just enjoy where you are at the moment, and I think because every ground is so unique and individual, we were there really excited to be at Carlisle, and we took photos and I think that each ground we went to, my dad and myself, we were very insistent on getting a picture of me under a club sign. That was really important, so in the album that we would later put together, you would know where you were because you'd have a sign saying Carlisle United or whatever club you're at. So that was really important, probably more important than taking a photo of the ground from afar for some reason. And we also had to factor in the sort of fact that we couldn't take 30, 40 photos as you could now with your camera phone. We were taking one or two because of the expense of camera film and development. And, obviously I wished we'd taken a few more. But at the time, that wasn't the point, really.
No, and you wanted to make sure you took a proper photo. Yeah, I heard the click. No doubt.
Exactly.
That'd be a long trip to come back for another picture if you didn't take it properly. Yeah,
which was the case, unfortunately.
Tell us.
I know. And again, it's the real facts are lost in the mists of time. But unfortunately, club number 3. So we'd gone Carlisle, we'd gone Newcastle, which was great because the ground was open and we walked around St James's, which was brilliant. Then we went to Sunderland and Roker Park, obviously, another classic ground. I remember being there, and then when we got home, the photo hadn't taken of Roker Park. So at the time, I remember being disappointed. And then, of course, doing the book all these years later, I was thinking, well, maybe it exists somewhere. Maybe it's lost in an attic or somewhere, And I did loads of digging around and hunting and asked family and do you have any photos? No. So unfortunately, Roker Park is missing, and that's really sad.
There's always some
I do make
story.
apologies.
There's always something like that.
Yeah. I know. So
now, county ground at Northampton Town, was that your last ground? So how did you feel for finally completing the 92? How was that?
Yeah, really good. Again, I remember that really well. Quite sad, actually, looking back. So that was the end of our last trip in 1989. I think we'd had to change things a little bit because Lincoln had been re-promoted back up to the Football League because they'd obviously got relegated. And by the time it came around, they were back in the league, so we had to go and do Lincoln. So we were staying up there, and then we'd left Northampton for the last one, and then to come back down the sort of M1. So county ground, again, another classic, unique ground in the fact that they were sharing it with Northamptonshire County Cricket Club. So, no stand on one of the sides because of the cricket pitch. My grandfather was from Northampton, so we had sort of a good family link there. And just a proper ground. That it was open. We walked around. It was a sunny day. The club shop was open, so we got a little souvenir mug, which I still have, of the Cobblers. And I definitely remember driving away after that back home, thinking, "Oh no, that's it. We haven't got another ground to head to." That's really quite sad. And it was at a time where, you know, my dad and my mum had just split up that summer, and so it was the added emotional wrench, I guess, of what you're going through as a 16-year-old. You're not quite sure what the future holds. You're growing up as a young man, but you're still, relatively inexperienced in life, I guess. So it was all those mixtures going. Really proud to have done the trip and loved finishing it, but actually I would have loved to have carried on and done another 20 if there had been. Yeah.
I should have said, "Shall we do Europe next?"
Or non-league. Yeah, exactly.
Non-league.
Loads.
Yeah.
Let's go to the Ryman Premier. Exactly.
I was gonna say, ask, on your way to the grounds and stuff, if you saw some floodlights that weren't of the 92, were you ever tempted to just to make a small detour and have a look?
That's a really good question, and I think the answer is no to that. I think what we did do, we did some cultural asides, like, we went to Hadrian's Wall when we were driving between Carlisle and Newcastle. We sort of stopped and looked at the Tyne Bridge in Newcastle. We did a few other things, that were interesting stop-offs on the way. But no, I don't think we did. Even annoyingly, now I look back and think Bristol, obviously somewhere close to your heart. Bristol Rovers had left Eastville in '86, but the stadium was obviously still there. But we were off to Twerton Park because that's where Rovers were playing at the time. And you think back thinking, that would have been good to pop into Eastville and see what that was like. We did go to Newport County, even though they'd been relegated from the league. So technically they weren't in the 92 when we were driving through, but we were on our way to Cardiff and Swansea. So we did stop at Somerton Park as it was those days. So yeah, I guess in a way we did, but it wasn't like, oh yeah, we're driving through, Winchester, let's go and see Winchester City or anything. No, I think Dad would have gone, no way, no, just no. In 92 is enough.
He would have said, yeah, the clock is ticking.
Exactly.
Oh man. Now I guess it's because of the technology. I was going through every page in the book and I didn't see any nighttime pictures or any dusk pictures, and I assumed that you may have got stuck in traffic sometime and you had you wanted to go to this ground or that ground. Were there any grounds that you got there at dusk and you're thinking, oh, this isn't going to come out well?
Yeah, there was only one actually. Yeah, only one on the whole trip, and that was Oldham Athletic, Boundary Park. So it was on the first trip on the Saturday. So we'd been to Old Trafford to watch the game against Derby, which was a really great experience, going to a big ground like that. Obviously very different Old Trafford to nowadays, but I was really excited to go to Old Trafford and a great game. Then we went to Main Road. Then we went to Stockport. And then finally that night, so by the time we got to Oldham, it was probably like 7 o'clock, I guess, or 8 o'clock. So it was getting dark, and the pictures do look quite dark of Boundary Park. But we didn't really want to visit clubs at night time. It was not really, you're not going to get a great picture. You're not going to be able to look around. And also, I think Dad, having done a lot of driving on this trip and a lot of the logistics, just needed a rest. So I think what we did quite well is we then drove closer to the next ground, as it were. So, as we'd been to Oldham, and then we drove on to Yorkshire and near Bradford, we stayed in Bingley. So we were ready to go the next day rather than sort of just crash at that last ground, as it were. So, yeah, none in the dark. Although when I did the trip again in 2000 with some mates, we drove around for 4 days and we did a lot of grounds in the dark because we literally had to do 92 grounds in 4 days. So that was a couple of all-night trips and turning up to, Grimsby Town and at 3 a.m. and taking a picture and then moving on. So that was another great experience. But that was the potluck. Which ones were in the night time? And
you had 3 people to share the driving this time.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. We were knackered
Big
at
difference.
the end of that. Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. I noticed a few bits and pieces. So we mentioned Bristol Rovers and Twerton Park, and you said that you studied in Loughborough University, but then you before that, did you study in Bath?
I did have a year in Bath. Yeah, so I retook my A levels in Bath.
I see it was it.
Because so my academic career, we won't go on about it too much, but no, I did have to retake my A levels in Bath, which was a really good experience for me. It got me away from the sort of, the family environment. It made me study, and luckily for me, Bristol Rovers were playing at Twerton Park, so I wouldn't say I went every week or every fortnight, but I enjoyed going. This was the 91-92 season.
That's right.
Where Rovers were in the Championship, as it was, good standard of football, and again, upsetting some bigger sides. I think they did relatively well that season. I can't honestly remember. But I love going to Twerton Park because I could just get the bus from town. It's a beautiful ground. You've got the houses and the fields and hills looking over it. And Rovers, it was like, I suppose, going back to like when I used to go and see Wimbledon at Plough Lane. It had that sort of, it was a non-league ground, wasn't it? And it had that feel of the visiting sides really didn't fancy it. It felt a bit like that. And Rovers were a good team. And I remember, funnily enough, Ipswich won the Championship that season to go back up to the top flight. And I remember I was being so impressed with two Bristol Rovers players, Tony Pounder and Justin Skinner, that I wrote to Ipswich. John Lyle was the manager at the time. I just wrote them a letter saying, I really think you should look at these two Rovers players, for the future. They're really good. Come, have you been scouting them? It's just really quite a sort of naive thing to write to a football manager. But kindly that, the club wrote back saying, oh, thank you very much for your scouting report. We really appreciate it. They didn't
here's
go
another one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, throw it on the pile. They didn't go on to sign those players, but they're very, very fine players who had good careers.
So do you actually? Sorry, finish.
No, I was saying that's the only time I've ever done that.
Okay.
Suggested a player.
Do you still keep an eye on Rovers results, or that's long gone?
I do.
Or?
Yeah, no, I do. I do have an affinity with Bristol Rovers, definitely. And for the book, Jeff Twentyman was kind enough to contribute a memory, and obviously, Bristol Rovers legend. He's also just released a book, which I'm sure is really, really good. And yeah, I do keep. Again, it's one of those things where when you're young, you latch onto a club for a certain reason, and having the quartered shirts was not unique in the sense that Wickham also have quartered shirts, but it was just the fact they look really cool in those shirts, I think, and I think if you're a football neutral, as it were, and there's a city or a town with two clubs, I think you just sway towards one of them for some reason. So I was always in the Rovers camp against the City camp, even though I'm not from Bristol. But if they were playing each other, I'd probably want Bristol Rovers to win. And you could say the same about Liverpool and Everton. I'd probably favour Everton to win, probably because they're the underdogs in most of the games they play. So you'd have
blue
to
shirt as well.
Blue, maybe it's I think it probably is the blue shirt. Never, well, apologies, but I've never really been into red teams.
That's okay. I'm into all sorts of colours, as you can probably.
But nowadays teams play in all sorts of colours anyway, so it doesn't matter, does it? Yeah.
I know it changes, swapping changes, don't they? And talking about colours and also changing the badges every now and then. I remember talking to a guy called Robert Santona in the previous episode, and talking about the Leeds United when they had that badge change for, I think it was 20 minutes or something before they got completely hammered by the fans. I was actually going to ask you about the Ipswich badge. So why is it a white horse? What's
the Suffolk Punch horse, famous in Suffolk. So again, I think it's always been for me that having the yellow trim on the badge is obviously that's the era I grew up in, and they've changed it to a red trim now, and it doesn't quite sit right with me. It'll always have to be the yellow badge that is the iconic one. It'd be a shame if Ipswich changed their badge in the future. I really hope they don't. I can see why clubs sometimes feel they need a rebrand, and that's fair enough. But again, I think it's the ones you grow up with that you constantly see on the sticker books or wherever, and you think, well, that's their badge. They don't need to change that. What's the history of the Bournemouth badge in that sense?
Bournemouth one. When I first started following Bournemouth, I didn't like this badge at all. I thought it was hideous. I think a guy heading a ball. I mean, but then it grows on you, and then you realise at some stage it's quite a unique badge. The gentleman who is supposed to be this person here, if I can see what my badge is Dickie Dowsett, and I think it was in the early 70s when they rebranded from Boscombe Athletic, Bournemouth and Boscombe Athletic, to AFC Bournemouth. They wanted to give it more of a European feel, and I think they were just talking inside the boardroom and said, "Oh, what should the badge be?" And Dickie said, "Right, just put the ball on his head and take some pictures." And I think it just happened. And at this point in the podcast, I say if I'm wrong, just put some comments below, because I'm not a historian, even though I do want to interview a historian for AFC Bournemouth, because I love football history. I've studied Catalan football history. I have over 50 books, some dating back to 1928, 1953. I mean, lots of old books are thankfully not falling apart because they've been kept in good condition. But it's just the whole history of football in regions and different parts of Europe, which I'm fascinated about. But yeah, that's the Bournemouth badge. Prior to that was probably more traditional looking badge. I think it just had a kind of like a white background with a red cross and some I think it would be BFC or something. I don't know. I'll just have to find out. Just put me on the spot there, but that's okay.
No, that's all right. No, it's fine. I mean, even at, having been into football for so long, I still love the fact that I'm learning things about clubs all the time. And when I was researching the book, I reread Simon Inglis's Football Grounds of Great Britain, which again was just you come across so many fascinating facts about how clubs were formed and the efforts of the chairman and the fans to get the clubs off the ground. And what I was fascinated by many clubs, and it's no surprise really, but obviously when they first formed, the amount of different grounds they were using in their early days, so they would, some clubs would have like 5 former grounds almost in touching distance to their present ground, because that's where they would play on a field here, or they would move here. That's fascinating. I think I remember reading one of the clubs, maybe not the only one, who have or had stayed at their original ground for so long was Huddersfield Town at Leeds Road. So they'd never played at another ground. They'd always played at Leeds Road, and then obviously now they've moved out of that, of course, and that's no longer exists. But so many other clubs just moved around the area so much, and as they grew, they needed more space or whatever. So again, just fascinating how each club has their own unique history.
Yeah, I just tried to add some pictures to the screen, but it's not working. It's sort of yes, I think my Wi-Fi is not 100%. Maybe everyone in the house is using the it's can you see something about the gates?
Yeah, I can see. I can see the gates. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, okay. See, I just get this wheel that's going round and round. So
you brought up the club shop, and then you brought up the gates.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm glad you can see it, but I think this is the recording, and I probably won't be able to get it on the recording. But all good. I think it's amazing. Aston Villa still playing that nice that Villa Park. I don't think they've been there the whole time that they've existed, but a lot of people say they love going to Villa Park. I think Burnley's ground as well was one of them. Again, another traditional, old-fashioned. But I mean, the great thing about your book is seeing all these household names of different stadiums, and it takes you back, doesn't it? It takes if you've been following football for a while, it takes you back to Roker Park. You really remember the old names of these grounds. So I mean, that's awesome. I saw a little footnote in the Scunthorpe United that you've been paintballing with the squad in 2002, and I'm thinking that's just put in such a little tiny corner. I think I'm going to have to bring this up. Now, was it your uni mate that was a Scunthorpe fan, or?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't due to Matt, who I went on the second trip with. No, it was. I was working at ITV Digital that year,
right?
And we were working on the the EFL effectively. It wasn't Premier League coverage, it was EFL. So my task was to make some short films about different EFL clubs, league clubs. And it was like a different one every week. So I had to come up with something new every week. And we did some really fun program, VTs, including an amazing day with Carlton Palmer at his house, which I will never forget. And I can't tell the stories from that day because they were outrageous, but it was fun. It was a very, very entertaining day with Mr. Palmer. But yes, Scunthorpe. So at that stage, it was late in the season. I think they were going for promotion, and I went up with a reporter, a friend of mine, called Mark Bishop, and Brian Laws was the manager of Scunthorpe at the time. Yeah. And I think they were going paintballing, and they said, "Well, come with us. It would make a really nice little film." The club were really buoyant. They were on a great run of results. It was like, yeah, come and join us. And so we went. We all got geared up, and I was the producer, and we had Mark, who was the presenter, and obviously cameraman. And I thought I had a nice little idea. I bought some toy soldiers, the real small ones, and I painted them in the colours of Scunthorpe's promotion rivals. I mean, this is intricate detail, right? So this was the last shot of the piece. I've still got the piece somewhere. I'll send it to you. So I'd painted, let's say whoever it was, Wigan or Northampton or whatever it was, and I painted each one, and then I put them on a little tree stump. And for the last shot of the film, we sort of fired a paintball as it was like Scunthorpe are blowing away their promotion rivals, and you'd see the Wigan soldier scattered, and you'd see the Rochdale. I mean, I thought, what? That's great, and left the Scunthorpe one standing, and they went on to win promotion. So that was really fun. Brian Laws was a really nice guy, welcomed us, and it was a good day. I don't remember being. I think the Scunthorpe squad turned on our presenter at the end, and absolutely fired a load into him. Yeah. But
I'm saying, didn't touch the camera. I suppose.
No, exactly. No, don't touch the
expensive equipment.
Yeah, it was good fun. That.
Awesome. I also noticed that you dedicate quite a few pages to Watford. Watford Football Club. So what's your connection? I know that you and your dad had that was a special ground for you guys. Just what was that?
Yeah, I love. It's a really special place, Vicarage Road. So as I said, we lived in Amersham in Buckinghamshire, so not anywhere near Ipswich. So I couldn't go every week. So, and I think it was Dad who just said, "Well, let's go to Watford because they're close by and they're doing really well." And Graham Taylor was manager. So I remember going the first time against Oldham. It was actually the game John Barnes made his debut in, ironically, even though I didn't know that at the time. And this was in 80-81 season. This was the 81-82 season, which is iconic in Watford's history because it was the first time they got promoted to the First Division. And then we got a season ticket really quickly. So we went every game, and Luther Blissett was brilliant. And, you had Steve Sherwood in goal, Pat Rice, who'd come from Arsenal, Will Frostron, Steve Terry, Kenny Jackett coming through. Ross Jenkins was still playing up front. So that, more than anything, is my football birth in a way, because we were there. It was weird because I was an Ipswich fan going to Watford and really enjoying Watford's success, really enjoying it. But I would still have that, what did Ipswich get up to today? That was still my club. So it was a bit odd. And then they won promotion in the spring of 82, and then we moved to Hampshire in the summer of 82. So our short-term love affair with Watford was kind of over because we sort of moved away. So I never got to see them in the First Division. They finished second in their very first season in the First Division, which was incredible. Qualified for Europe. Amazing. So I missed all those games, which was a shame because it would have been great to sort of follow their journey. But a lot of love for Watford and a great club. And I think what was really important back then was, in an era of hooliganism, there was right, Watford. Yeah. Watford was a safe place to go. They made it special. It made it especially safe for families. Had family stand before probably any other club did. Graham Taylor was so keen on making sure it was a good experience for people to come and watch. and people behaved themselves there. And so I felt safe going there as an 8, 9-year-old, whereas, going to other grounds in those days was pretty hairy. So, a lot of respect for Watford for really caring about the community.
Awesome. And was Watford's rise, that was was it like from 4th division to 1st division? Was it that kind of rise?
It wasn't quite in successive seasons, but it was not far off. They
right.
Obviously there is a fantastic podcast series called Enjoy the Game, which charts Watford's rise, under, obviously, with Elton John coming in as chairman, getting Graham Taylor in from Lincoln and their rise up the divisions. It's just a really, really fascinating for anyone who loves football history. They had a couple of seasons in Division 2 before they then went up to the 1st division. So I think by then they were ready. They were ready to stay in the 1st division. They hadn't done this, crazy rise and couldn't sustain it. They had some really, really fine players. And they lost Luther Blissett. Of course, he went off to Italy and
to AC Milan.
But came back. Nigel Callaghan was a great winger. Who went on to play for Villa, and so and they stayed in the 1st division for quite a few years and have been sort of up and down since. I haven't been to Watford for many years now, but and the stadium has changed unbelievably. From
I bet it has, but it's still Vicarage Road, isn't it?
Still Vicarage Road, but you just wouldn't recognise it. And we used to sit right behind Graham Taylor. On the benches, so you could hear him. You could hear him shout instructions, and it was again a really fascinating experience. And my dad loved it as well. Yeah, we really did bond over those sort of Watford home games, and we went to a few away games as well at Leicester and at Luton and Southampton. Yeah, it's good.
Okay. Luther Blissett went to Italy and they came to FC Bournemouth. So
of course.
I don't know how long he was in Italy for, but was Luther? I mean, I'd love to have Luther on this podcast eventually. But was Luther part of that journey?
Very much so. Yeah,
he was. So from the 4th all the way. Okay, because I didn't know.
A few of them. Ross Jenkins was one of the others. So up front, Steve Sherwood in goal would have been on that journey, and probably 6 or 7 of that team were incredible, really. And I love those. I was, when Wimbledon did it, of course, in the 80s, I thought that journey was incredible, because you think, how can 4th division players, rise up to the standard of being Division 1 players? But they absolutely proved that you could do that and succeed, as well. So it was that's the football romantic in me always loves those kind of stories.
Oh, I love them. Yeah. And I guess it seems to be more familiar in English football than other countries. Although I guess you've got to give it that you don't really follow other countries' football leagues, so you wouldn't know. But I know Graham Potter managed the Swedish side and he managed to bring them up, similar style, to win the Swedish Cup or go to the Swedish Cup final and stuff. But Bournemouth is not too far off in that kind of rise as well, I guess, with the 2008 almost coming, minus 17 point deduction and then just making the way up. I guess a few more seasons than Watford or Wimbledon would have done. But again, having players like Tommy Elphick and Adam Smith, who still plays for Bournemouth, and Mark Pugh and lots of other ones who had played for Bournemouth in the League One or League Two and then managed to make it in the Premier League. So yeah, it does happen. Okay, just got a couple of quick fire questions. Favorite ground?
Favorite ground, Portman Road, obviously number 1. Vicarage Road, probably number 2, but that's for personal, sentimental reasons. Ones I really like going to would be Villa Park. I was lucky enough to go to Goodison Park earlier this season to experience what that was like before that closes, which again was everything I'd hoped it would be. It really is a fantastic ground. So they would be sort of my picks. But also low, if you go down into the lower leagues, places like Exeter City, I really enjoyed going to see a game at Exeter. Plymouth, home park's a great ground. So yeah, lots of again, everyone is unique. So there's not one I really don't like, I guess, in that respect.
Best atmosphere?
best atmosphere ever I've been to a football match would probably be, because it was such an amazing match, Wycombe Wanderers beating Wimbledon in an FA Cup 5th round replay on penalties at Selhurst Park. So it wasn't a massive crowd, but it was the most ridiculous match of football I've ever seen. There's no way Wycombe should have won that game, but they did. They had such spirit. That was the season they got to the FA Cup semi-final.
Right.
And, everything was against them that day. Players sent off, players injured, going behind, last-minute equalisers, winning on penalties, the goalie scoring the winning penalty.
Oh, wow.
It just left us exhausted, because I followed Wycombe as well quite a bit in the years gone by. So that will never get topped, I don't think.
Cool. Best home fans.
Best home fans. I'm going to say Sunderland, only because I went to the playoff final, Wycombe against Sunderland, a few years ago, and I've never heard a noisier crowd than Sunderland. And we were travelling on the way down, me and my son, and we happened to be in a tube full of Sunderland fans. We were the only Wycombe sort of supporters there, and they were brilliant. They were chatting away. They were so full of energy and excitement. And
Awesome.
I was, even though Wycombe lost on the day, I was really pleased that Sunderland had made it up, because I'd never heard a noise like that. Brilliant noise.
Oh, cool. This is a really important one. Best halftime food and beverage.
Ooh, crikey! It can be pretty dodgy at times. Do you know what? I'm going to go for my local team, Macclesfield FC.
Okay.
We always have a Balti pie at Macclesfield FC, and
the Balti pie. Yeah.
I go there quite regularly. They're in the Northern Premier League now, having sort of come back from, going bankrupt and being reborn under Robbie Savage and Rob Smethurst. And I love going there. And they do a really good fan zone now, where you can get pizza, you can get beer, you can watch the match from pitch side. They've really, again, tapped into that local community that want to come, and they've responded by going, and it's a really nice atmosphere. So Mac for the pies.
Mac for the pies. Now I'm going to see if my picture works this time.
I can see the Cherry Bees shop.
No, yeah. Yes. What is the best club shop? This isn't a hit.
Well, you got to say the Cherry Bees shop, obviously.
I love it. It's the best.
Well, I know, it's a shame it wasn't open, really, wasn't it? Best club shop. I'm going to go, and there's a picture in the book at Newcastle, which is iconic of its era, because obviously, the mega stores that the clubs have today are ridiculous. But the Newcastle club shop in 1988, it looks a little bit like that, the Bournemouth one, apart from the paint is peeling off, the shutters are dirty. It's just sort of what it was. That's what football was. And you didn't mind the fact it was a porter cabin where you'd buy your scarf or whatever. It didn't matter. The fact is, they actually stocked the stuff that you wanted to buy from your club. So, I miss those days. Yeah, actually, the Ipswich shop's pretty good. Actually, I always spend a few quid when I go there.
All right. Okay. I'm going to see if this picture now works. Yay! This is what I was trying to show earlier. Now, I think those gates are still there. Obviously, you had a few coats of paint since then, but I love those gates. I think you can't get rid of those, even if they're brilliant. Move to a new stadium.
Yeah,
it's just.
I mean, they're beautifully designed. I probably didn't even realize at the time. But the structure and the artistry in that, I'm really, really impressed with that. Middlesbrough have used their old gates from Ayresome Park in the Riverside. West Ham have done the same with the Bowling Ground gates. The London. So again, really important for fans to keep in touch with things that they remember from their formative days of going. But I don't think you'll see anything else like those gates. I mean, they'd be. The funny thing is, talking about signs and gates. Port Vale, when we went to Port Vale back on the trip, there's an amazing long sign, really probably the biggest one in football, that said Port Vale FC. And when I was there last year talking to the club, I'm like, whatever happened to that sign? And they're like, we don't know. It just sort of went, when we were refurbing the stadium. And I'd love to think that a Port Vale fan has that massive sign in their garden somewhere, because it's quite simple, but I imagine anyone going to Port Vale would have just seen that sign over and over and over again.
Yeah,
and they
no, I'm
just
trying to bring it
disappear,
up.
don't they? Yeah.
Oh God,
So,
man, that'd be a hard. But if it got destroyed, you'd rather have
yeah.
someone look after it. You'd not know where it is, but yeah. Okay, so no, I just mentioned this. So basically, this is the best place to go to Conquer Editions. Now, I love the word conquer. Conquer is those things you used to play in England, wasn't it? Where you'd get the string and you dip it in vinegar or something like that to make sure they got tougher.
Yeah, there was all
A form of
apocryphal
cheating.
stories of, you could put it in the microwave, you could cover it in vinegar or lacquer, or I certainly remember playing Conkers back in the day, and so Conquer Editions is a Leicester-based independent publisher,
Right.
and they produce some loads of really, really great football books. So if anyone goes on the Conquer Editions website, they'll see some really, really interesting books, that do delve into the sort of the retro memorabilia sort of football as it was, but they're all in really individual stories and some really good some books there. But of course, if you're going on the Conquer Editions website, then you might as well buy my one.
That's it. They go there, and I think there's a similar independent publisher in Australia that does, again, mainly football books by Australian authors. So, but this seems to be like the English version of that. So yeah. Okay, so that's where they can buy the books. I've got a question. Do you have any tips for those budding authors or people who want to write a football book?
That's a really good
What
question.
would you recommend them, or what would you say to them?
When I was thinking about doing it, and I had written an article for the BBC Sport website, which was a precursor to this, just to see if there was some interest in it, which there was, and some nice feedback. So I kind of that's maybe a good tip, as I'd already had something published that was about the story I wanted to tell, even though it was in sort of a shorter form. Obviously, having the photos was a massive help, because you couldn't tell the story without the photos. But equally, there was a story there. There was a story of the fact that Dad and I did this trip, and there was a story that it was so long ago that those grounds don't exist anymore. So I think it does have a kind of, even though people do the 92 all the time, and that's great, that they go and see the matches. I'm nowhere near doing the 92 in terms of watching matches at grounds, but I still went to all the grounds. If you see what I mean? So I think you've got to have that unique story that people are going to want to be interested in, and if you can add flavor to it by having those photos, or all I did really was I put together a sort of PowerPoint pitch document, and I laid out the structure I thought the book would work, and I emailed 2 publishers, and Conquer luckily got back to me straight away, and we chatted, and we really got on, and we agreed a deal really quickly. So I was very lucky in the sense that I wasn't, it didn't take me that long to find someone interested in it, but that's because I think I had quite a unique story to tell. So I would say write something first and have a sort of something tangible to take to a publisher and say, this is what I think a book could be, and then just try and have the unique insights. And I wanted to, again, just for a bit of extra flavor, as I said, I wanted to contact as many former pros as I could to sort of say, well, I wasn't clearly watching Bournemouth much in 1988, but David Puckett, who contributed to the book for the Bournemouth page and also the Aldershot page, he did, of course he did, and I obviously respect the players who played at these grounds. I didn't play at them. I'm not a footballer. I'm just someone who went around taking photographs. So it was important to me to have that football context in there, and to speak to people like Dave was great, and so many players from that era who I respected and loved playing. So that was a special moment for me to give it a bit of extra stardust in that.
Nice extra spice. Yeah. And there's so many iconic players, even if it's not the most well-known ones. But I mean, just the fact, there were a lot of them had the sideburns and the moustaches, and they had the big collars. Like it's and a lot of the players then pretty much stayed with the club for most of their career. So I mean, who better to talk about that club? And if I haven't actually gone into the players' stories, but I'm sure they some of them would have stories about the state of the dressing rooms, or what they did to the opposition dressing rooms, or things like that. I mean, it
Yeah.
could be anyone's guess, really,
No,
couldn't it?
absolutely. And they were so kind with their time. Some of them I would speak to for like an hour or so. Obviously, I couldn't get all their stories in the book, which is a shame, because there was loads more to tell in a way. But that could be another book. You never know.
Book.
Because
That's right. Awesome. I understand you have, and this is going away from football in England, but you have a connection with Atlanta sports.
Yeah. It's like one.
How did
So
that come about? What happened? How come Atlanta? Because I mean, those that watch this podcast know that I follow Atlanta United and Atlanta sports, so I'm just interested
yeah.
how that came about for you.
So we had a family holiday to the States in 1982. Obviously, the first time I'd been there, and I was fascinated by everything. We went to California, but we also went to Atlanta. My dad had some work colleagues there, so we stayed with them. I remember going to Six Flags amusement park or theme park. Oh my God, that was just like, this is incredible. So anyway, luckily enough, they took us to the Atlanta Braves baseball game. So this was 1982.
Fulton County, County Baseball Stadium, the round one.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
I lived opposite there.
Oh right, okay, yeah. So being in, this is my first baseball game. This is Americana all over, isn't it? You have your hot dog, and the funny thing was, because we were such a big group and because there were quite a few kids, we all wore red and white striped or hooped shirts, right? So we could always find, you wouldn't get lost effectively. That's so there's probably like 30 of us all in these red and white hoop shirts going to watch the Braves. And I just latched onto Atlanta as my city, my team, my sports team. Mm-hmm. So, I started following the Falcons, and when I really got into NFL in the mid 80s as well. So, and the Braves, when I could, I have been back to Atlanta. I have watched the Braves play and on the road as well. And, they won the World Series, I think, in 92 with some great pitching, John Smoltz and Tom Glavine. And I remember Avery. And I remember thinking, really cool team. Maybe they've not won as many World Series as they probably should have done over the years, but certainly remember
the Yankees beat a few. Yeah. Oh, well.
But no, never seen a Falcons game. Would love to see an NFL game at one point, but I have done a bit of crazy in the States. In
that new stadium, they have the Mercedes-Benz stadium.
That looks amazing. Yeah. And as much as it's nice to go to, Spotland and Gig Lane, I can also appreciate going to really nice stadiums, especially in the States as well. So, I'm not sort of always hankering after 80s football grounds. I really do appreciate that some of the new grounds or stadiums in the world are absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Well, I think that the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta is hosting one of the semi-finals of the World Cup in 2026. So that's a good thing. But when you're following Atlanta sports, you must be prepared to suffer. And one game comes to mind. It's the Falcons game, the Super Bowl. I think we were leading 28-3 against the Patriots, and that was devastating game. You're obviously nodding, so you remember it as well.
I think I remember. I do remember. Yeah, I do remember watching that, because again, obviously the Super Bowl being quite late on here on a Sunday, it's not always easy to watch. But with the Falcons getting there, I did watch that, and I enjoy it. It's good fun. Yeah,
that's the thing is that when they do win something, it's that much sweeter. Well, that's the excuse that we tell ourselves. So.
No, definitely. It's like supporting Ipswich. You have to wait. You have to wait 20 years for something to come good. But when we won promotion last year, it was very, very exciting. And
so staying in the US, and I think we'll probably end with this. You recently returned from the US filming a documentary. So if you're able to tell us what it's about and when can people expect to see?
Yeah. So in my role at the BBC, I've been lucky enough to make a film this year called F1 in 10 years. So it's about Formula One, obviously, and we've sort of looked into the future a little bit, and we've asked, some of the very, very senior figures inside F1, including the CEO of F1, Stefano Domenicali, and Lando Norris, the head of Williams Racing, James Vowles, and others, really just to think about what F1 could be like in 10 years, because F1, especially in the States, but all over the world, we've seen this incredible growth of interest from especially a younger audience and a female audience over the last few years. And I think it's really exciting. I'm not sort of dyed in the wool F1 fan, but I can really appreciate that it's an incredibly exciting sport to be involved in. So it's a program. It'll be on BBC News globally, the BBC News channel, and it's actually going out this very weekend, which very good timing for those who can access the BBC iPlayer. It will be on the BBC iPlayer. So it's called F1 in 10 years, and it's just a interesting look, because I think sometimes in sport, senior figures aren't always willing to say, right, well, this is what F1 could be like in 10 years, in themes of diversity of the grid and of teams, or sustainability, which of course is a very interesting factor with F1. How the cars might develop and how the fuels might develop. So that's really the project. And going to Austin and going to Spa in Belgium for the race there to film was, a really interesting experience to see, behind the scenes a bit what the Formula One sort of family is like, and really, really interesting stuff.
Cool. Oh, can't wait. I'm sure it'll turn up somewhere on the internet later. So yeah. How long is the documentary? Is it?
It's 26 minutes.
Okay, that's just a nice size.
It's a decent length. Yeah, it's a watchable length. We cover a lot of topics in it. It does, like an F1 race, it races by pretty quickly, so the pace is high, but that's what you'd expect from an F1 program. Cool.
Well, I'm really grateful for your time. Thank you so much for. I mean, we could talk on forever, but it's just been brilliant just going through. I really wanted to dedicate a lot of time to Ipswich and your book and stuff like that, and it's just so interesting. And I highly recommend the book, because it's, like I said before, I skim through it, read some stuff, go back to it, and think, oh, I didn't notice this, even though it's like roughly two pages per ground on average. You just find stuff in there. Again, I'm thinking it's just it's just I love
as my best pal called it. He said it's a great toilet book.
Oh my god!
I hopefully he meant that as a compliment.
Well, in that case, you need one for that room and another book for the bookcase.
Yeah.
Oh man. No, I appreciate you coming on. And is there anything else? Any other projects you've got on the pipeline, or you're taking a break, or?
Yeah, taking a bit of a break over Christmas. But actually, obviously, we're talking, a day before the Ipswich Bournemouth game. So just wanted to, wish Bournemouth, who are a fantastic club, all the best in that game. Obviously, it'd be nice if we could get a win and get ourselves away from the bottom three a little bit. But full respect to what Bournemouth have done over the years to establish yourself. And I think a lot of people have a lot of time for the club.
Yeah, and the new owner is just fantastic, it raised a few eyebrows when Gary O'Neill was given his marching orders, so to speak. But yeah, he knew what he was doing, and the rest is history, as they say. So
I definitely Europe next, or a cup win would be great, wouldn't it? That would really seal the deal.
Probably a cup run or cup win. I'm not sure if we've got the depth yet for Europe and be on 4 different fronts if we're talking about League Cup, FA Cup, Europe, and Premier League. But this is something with the new training ground that we're building just outside Bournemouth. I think that can be achieved in a relative short space of time, and trying to build those teams, or their supporter teams or reserve teams up. And I think it's great. Most fans would want Europe, but the reality of it and the importance of staying in the Premier League, I think, is I think the short term until we can get that academy fully functioning and running. So cool. All right. Well, all the best for Ipswich. I do want them to stay up, because it's just a team that brings back so many memories, especially the players we were talking about before: Mick Mills, Paul Mariner, Terry Butcher. Terry Butcher actually had a stint at Sydney FC as manager. I think it was just for one season. But I don't think it went too well. But look, you've got to try. And full credit to coming out all this way to try and manage
Yeah,
an A-League.
indeed.
So
And
you
I
can probably
think,
tell that.
sorry, just before we go, I think
Yep.
one of Ipswich's players, Mish Davray, had quite a bit of time at Perth Glory, I think, as manager.
Right. Okay.
Mish was at Ipswich for many, many years and was part of that sort of 80-81 squad, although didn't sort of play many games that season, but stayed at Ipswich for probably like 10 years.
Wow.
Because I remember getting him on the radio once. It's sort of, I think he won league titles at Perth Glory, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I'm not too much in knowledge with Perth, but I am supporting our Bill Foley team, Auckland FC.
Yes.
So I was in Sydney earlier in the city today. We organised we call it watch party. That's an American term, but watched the game, the Kiwi Derby, which Auckland won 2-1, and it was their first goal that they conceded in 6 matches since starting. So we won 6 in a row and conceded the first goal today. So that was a record, 532 minutes without conceding a goal. So
great start, yeah.
Great stuff. So so it's all happening. It's all happening with Bournemouth and Auckland and all the other clubs that Bill's involved with. So
yeah,
cool. All right, thanks so much for coming on, Giles. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed that, Nick, and really appreciate you asking me on. Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.
Take care.
Cheers.